is Manuel Roman Lacayo. I am the Associate Director for the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Pittsburgh. It's my pleasure to be able to support this effort from City of Asylum and the Department of English at Pitt as well, and to have Ana Portnoy Brimmer and Melissa Lozada-Oliva run the workshop. Malcolm Friend will be your host, and we are just thrilled to be able to move on and think about things other than what has been taking everybody's mind for the last few weeks.
Okay. Yeah, so really quickly, I just want to say thank you to Manuel and everyone at the Center for Latin American Studies for their support in this event, and especially for hosting this event through their channels, through Zoom, as well as through their Facebook page. Also want to thank the Department of English, Gail Rogers in the Department of English, for their support in this event, as well as the Year of Creativity at Pitt for their support in this event. Just a little bit of background before we get into the workshop. So I am on the advisory board for the Latinx Proud reading series out of City of Asylum, curated by Carla Lamb. The aim of the series is to bring important Latinx voices in literature into the city of Pittsburgh, as well as to highlight the Latinx voices that are already here, and to highlight our stories, our literature, our words. Okay, so I'm just going to very briefly introduce our two workshop leaders today before seating the stage and letting them do their thing. Our first workshop leader will be Ana Portnoy Brimmer, who is a Puerto Rican poet and performer. She is currently an MFA candidate at Rutgers Newark, and her chapbook manuscript, To Love an Island, won YesYes Book's 2019 Vinyl 45 Chapbook Contest. Our second workshop leader will be Melissa Lozada-Oliva, who received her MFA from NYU and is the author of Peluda from Button Poetry. Both are extremely talented poets, extremely talented organizers, extremely talented workshop leaders. And I will cede the stage to Ana Portnoy Brimmer, who will open up the workshop for us.
Thank you, Malcolm, for that introduction. Buenas tardes, good afternoon. I hope people can hear me okay. I quickly just want to thank Malcolm Friend for his insatiable love of poetry and his commitment and hard work, and for the invitation. I also want to thank Manuel Roman Lacayo and Luz Amanda, Hank, and Jessica Kraft, and the team of the Center for Latin American Studies for their support and for hosting us. And Melissa, it's an honor to be co-facilitating with you, so I'm very excited for that. And anyone else I might have missed and not mentioned, thank you for your dedication and tireless work. My workshop is titled Writing Disaster, Ethics and Decoloniality. And before I even start actually introducing myself, I want everybody who's present, I want us to do a quick free write. So in the form of a list, meaning writing in catalog or list form, I want you to think of your community or your communities and identify either moments, phenomena, or incidents that your communities have experienced that you would categorize as disaster. I'll repeat that again. I want you to think about your community or your communities and identify moments, phenomena, or incidents that they have experienced that you would categorize as disaster. I'll give you a few minutes to do that, but write it in list form. Let's do that for a couple of minutes. Thank you for doing that. Don't lose the list, keep it at hand because we'll be referring back to that in a few. And before we start, I just want to give, I guess, a little quick introduction to disaster and writing and a little background about myself. As Malcolm said, my name is Ana, and I'm a poet and organizer from Puerto Rico. And I moved to the US 2 years ago because I got accepted to the Rutgers Newark MFA program. I'm a Hurricane Maria survivor, a product of the student and anti-austerity movements in Puerto Rico, a child of a debt-ridden colony, a militant of current social uprisings in Puerto Rico, and I was there for the recent earthquake that happened in January as well. In other words, I've been a part of a generation that has experienced multiple forms and variations of disaster in the archipelago. And for the past 3, almost 4 years, I've been engaging with, exploring, and writing disaster and trying to articulate and hold myself to a responsible, humane, and decolonial practice of writing disaster. And so disaster is an incredibly broad, complex, and loaded concept and reality. Oftentimes people tend to associate it with natural disasters, which is definitely one of its variations, and sometimes not so natural in a way, right? And very much a human-provoked phenomenon. But there are so many kinds of disaster, from the macro and structural to the micro and more local, which are inevitably linked to and a part of the macro and structural, right? Such as economic disaster when we think about debt, recessions, disaster capitalism or capitalism as a whole, eviction, homelessness, gentrification. When we think about political disaster, such as war, corruption, colonialism, occupation. When we think about human and civil rights disasters, such as dictatorships, police brutality, concentration camps, refugee crises, femicides, etc., natural and environmental disasters, such as hurricane, earthquakes, pipelines, water and air pollution, and the categorizations could go on, no? And grow narrower and more specific. And in reality, it even becomes futile to separate and parse them out into categories because they all intersect and in multiple ways can be categorized and understood under all of these, no? And currently we're undergoing a global instance of disaster as well, COVID-19, no? A pandemic that is ravaging and really testing our social fabric and intersecting with so many other structures in our society that have been, if not on the brink of disaster, then full-on disaster mode for a while now. Our healthcare system, our capitalist economy, the housing crisis, the precarious job market and gig economy, our energy policy, and just the prison industrial complex, a whole lot. So therefore, COVID-19 is a political disaster too, not a humanitarian disaster, and it becomes very evident that disaster is multifaceted, nuanced, and layered. So in the muck of this all, if we're to take on the incredibly daunting and fragile and responsibility-laden task of writing about disaster, how do we do it ethically? That's a very big question, no? Should we write as witness or as a person with direct experience? How do we write disaster in its complexity and not engage in trauma porn or exploitation or sensationalism or appropriation, or flatten the emotional tenor of a situation to monotone? How do we strike a balance, explore the nuances between grief and joy, survival and resistance, desperation and hope? How do we know when we're writing from a position of power versus a position of horizontality or disadvantage? And how do we handle any of these responsibly, right? These are all really difficult questions and they have no simple answers. But a good way to begin addressing them is by understanding one's own positionality in relation to disaster. And so before we go further into that and do some writing exercises on that, I want us to read a poem that I dropped a link to in the chat, the Zoom chat. It's a poem by the Puerto Rican poet Raquel Salas Rivera from their book, While They Sleep, Under the Bed is Another Country, which in very broad terms explores the humanitarian and political aftermath of Hurricane Puerto Rico. And the poem in both English and in Spanish, Raquel writes in both languages, specifically Spanish, but they self-translate into English. And I'm wondering if I can get a volunteer to read the version in English for everybody in the room or in the Zoom room. Anybody willing to do that? If not, I can read both. But...
Yeah, I can read it. I have to go grab the book. But if you tell me what page it's on, or if you send me the link.
For sure. I dropped the link. So the
link
is
great.
chat. Yeah, the chat in the Zoom,
Got it.
room. Yeah. Thank you, Carla, for volunteering. Yeah. Okay.
One sec. Are you gonna go first or me? Are you first or me first?
You go first. You read the English version.
Okay. English version first. Okay, great. Okay, so I have it pulled up. And everyone can like hear me okay?
I just want to give a quick trigger warning, by the way, just in case. There's talk and language of like suicide and structural violence, just in case anybody feels like they need to, I don't know, take a step back or know about that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to pull it up. Note for a friend who wants to commit suicide after the hurricane by Raquel Salas Rivera. No one teaches us to accept death because death, that canned death, stays empty inside. The great hole of fuck it that wants to devour us. No one explains how we can become part of the impossible new world that is tomorrow, or how we are supposed to avoid falling into the perfect and permanent under-eye circle we can call facing the day. Mana, how not to understand. That is the question I avoid with the organizational fervor of a rescue team that never arrives. But I'll tell you this, desire isn't always followed by death. Sometimes I run into you in the street and you shine like an orb or a solar lamp, but you are still worth more than all the generations, in case you haven't been told 1,000 times. What other times without child? Other times your words reach me like a fundraiser that explodes and temporalizes truth, like an espachurrao, squashed, flattened, spread, aguacate on the sidewalk, green, gray from so much loving. We first have to find better answers than these automatic things. I don't say this to add responsibilities, but rather so that you know, sister, that the attempted murder comes from within, like the last refuge of a cowardly colonialism. Come here and I'll give you food and shelter while I have it. Kete añoño will cuddle, spoil, hold, and rock and sing. You and will duplicate the hugs. I can't heal the fathomless, but what kind of world would this be without you? What kind of world is this that harasses you without rescue? Let's speak of the future, not as realists, not as visionaries. Let's speak of the future because we will find it in a moth-eaten rug, in the tea of the drunken tree, in the buenos dias. There is coffee of a confused and sincere embrace. We have a bed and we remember. Yours forever, Raquel.
Thank you, Carla, for that beautiful reading. I'm going to read the poem in Spanish as well. Again, it's very important to consider Raquel's work in both languages. Just in case for those of you who didn't catch it, I dropped the link for the poem in the chat. That's a part of the Zoom conversation that we're having now. Some people can follow the poem while we're reading it out loud as well and refer back to it. So this is a poem in Spanish. Wrong page. Nota para una amiga que desea suicidarse después del huracán. Nadie nos enseña a aceptar la muerte, porque la muerte, esa muerte de latita, queda vacía en nosotros. El gran hueco del carajo que nos quiere devorar. Nadie nos dice cómo podemos integrarnos al nuevo mundo imposible del mañana. ¿Cómo se supone que evitemos caer en el círculo perfecto de una ojera permanente que llamamos darle al día? Mana, ¿cómo no entenderlo? Esa es la pregunta que hice con el fervor organizativo de un equipo de rescate que nunca llega. Pero te voy a decir esto. Después del deseo, no siempre viene la muerte. A veces te encuentro por la calle y brillas como astro o como lámpara solar. Pero igual vales más que todos los generadores, por si no te lo han dicho 1000 veces, y otras veces, sin tilde, y otras veces, me llegan tus palabras como una recaudación de fondos que explota y temporaliza la verdad, como un aguacate espachurrado en la acera, verde gris de tanto amar. Nos toca primero encontrar contestaciones mejores que estas mierdas automáticas. No lo digo por añadir responsabilidades, sino para que sepas que, hermana, el intento de matarnos viene desde adentro como un último refugio de un colonialismo cobarde. Vente para acá, que te doy comida y albergue mientras la tengas. que te añoño y te duplico los abrazos. No podré sanar lo insondable, pero ¿qué mundo sería este sin ti? ¿Qué mundo este que te acosa, sin rescate? Hablemos del futuro, ni realistas ni visionarios. Hablemos del futuro porque lo encontraremos en la alfombra carcomida, en el té de campanilla, en el buenos días al café, un vaso confuso y sincero. Tenemos cama y memoria, tuya para siempre, Raquel. And so again, that was a poem from Raquel Salas Rivera's collection, While They Sleep, Under the Bed is Another Country. And I can drop a link to that too a little bit later in the chat so you can all have the resource to that. Does anybody have initial reactions to the poem? People want to comment and share? Quick background, also Raquel, again, is a queer Puerto Rican poet. They were based in Philadelphia for 8 years, and they were in Philadelphia during Hurricane Maria's passing and aftermath in Puerto Rico. Any initial reactions to the poem, anybody?
I don't know if anyone can hear me. Can anyone hear me? Am I coming in?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, I guess the main thing that I sort of focused in on as the poems were being read was well, one in the English version, there's the elements of Spanish that are still kept in the early I that was in one of the lines, and also the Queteano and those other examples where the language remains consistent untranslated, which seems to suggest maybe a sort of importance in the original language that the author doesn't want lost, that I maybe as a speaker of Spanish don't fully understand, but definitely seems like that's very much an intentional desire to keep that language for the specific power that language has in its own right. Also, another thing that I noticed that I latched onto a lot was like imagery relating to like recovery efforts from after the hurricane. There's a lot of reference to things like generators and lights, which were things that I know had a lot of trouble getting the supplies for those back up and running in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, and a few other examples that I can't immediately remember right now. But yeah, a rescue team that never arrives, things just like relating to the general failure of organized relief efforts for Puerto Rico after the hurricane.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. Anybody else want to respond to that or just respond to the poem with their own comment? Any initial reactions? Thank you. I see that Manuel also commented. It says it's very moving for this time. Absolutely. And I think that was a very important point to bring up, no? The question around the imagery around organizational efforts, even mutual aid efforts for sure, because I guess the other question I wanted to pose to people is that as you read or listened to the poem, what did you notice about the way that Salas Rivera addresses these macro structural issues, no natural disaster, colonialism, the precarity of mental health, imperial violence? For example, what point of view is Raquel writing from? From the first person point of view, no, with a very specific addressal to a you, and therefore there's the use of the personal or the micro or even the specific, and therefore the imagery, the very tangible imagery to talk about these macro and structural poems and ground them emotionally through the specific. And then there's the acknowledgement of the struggle and pain of a Maria survivor, no, and not appropriating that experience or taking on it, but making space for it and holding it within the poem as well, which is one of the ways in which Raquel is dealing with, again, these macro and structural issues and addressing disaster, no? And I guess the other question I wanted to pose to people, if people are interested in responding, no, what form does the poem use to write about this, no? The epistolary or the letter, how do we think that's influencing or affecting the delivery of the poem? Anybody, if people want to, let me see if people are writing. I'm not paying attention to the chat.
Could you rephrase the question one more time?
The one around what form does the poem use to write about disaster? Yeah. How does writing in letter form or in epistolary, maybe, because that's the kind of form that Raquel is using there, or even it's almost like a diary entry turned letter or epistolary, no? How does that influence or affect the delivery of the poem? Especially like the topic of disaster events, like has a comment on that, or people just.
It makes it a lot more personal. She connects this big picture, sort of, disaster tends to be abstract because it affects people on such a large level that we get lost, we forget about the personal, like how it affects the person individually. But she does a great way of using the imagery of disaster to make it so personal, and in writing a letter or using the address of you really connects. Makes it very vibrant, like feeling as a reader.
Absolutely, yeah. Just for future reference, by the way, Raquel uses they them pronouns as we talk about their poetry and stuff. But that's a great point to bring up. And I think in connection to that, it can be very easy to replicate the pitfalls of journalism when we're writing, right? The flattening and dehumanizing distance, or the insistence and problematics of like objectivity or sensationalizing. So I think it's very, very on point to bring up the personal and the very intimate aspect of the writing within this poem. No, and to quote this other poet, Marwa Helal, in one of her poems, she writes, "Poems do work, journalism can't. Journalism is the work of the sleeping. Poetry is the work of the dreaming." So, and that's where the quote or the line closes. So poetry not only has the ability, but the duty, right, to counter the violences of so many documentarian practices. And Salas Rivera manages to do that by engaging the intimate, the personal and the vulnerable form of epistolary or letter writing, and exploring the emotional and subjective fruits of that post-hurricane reality, reflective of and shed light on the larger structural questions and problems. Unless anybody else wants to say something about the poem, even just like an emotional reaction that you had to it, we can do a little writing now as well, based on the list that you drafted at the beginning. Does anybody else want just react to the poem in any way? Or, Malcolm says, I'm thinking about how the letter also the poem makes an intimate object with things. Yeah, absolutely, Malcolm. Do you want to like elaborate on that, or just?
Wow, way to call me out. Yeah, no, again, like just thinking about, you pretty much summed it up, but the ways in which we get that sort of intimate perspective, and we're now forced to think about, okay, and I think Jessica was bringing it up as well, thinking about disasters are something that are very abstract to think about if you haven't experienced one. And even if you have experienced one, just thinking about thinking about statistics and all that other stuff. But the letter brings us into something intimate that maybe we're not supposed to see. We maybe are not supposed to have that sort of access, but we do get that access. And we're able to see the ways in which disaster affects even those sort of smallest scale versions of community, even like just our friendships.
Absolutely. Does anybody want to respond to that or add to that, or comment on their own, any kind of another reaction to the poem? Thoughts, comments, praise, disagreement?
So one thing I kind of thought about as we've been talking about like this importance of like, oh, sorry, am I interrupting someone?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. So it's talking about how the way it's written as a letter helps kind of just the personal level, and I was thinking about like the use of talking about like the disaster imagery of the like failed official response, and also connecting to how, like, very specifically, there's this one line in it in the poem towards the very end that made me realize this, that where is it? Come here and I'll give you food and shelter while I have it. Sort of maybe a reference to like how, and also at the very beginning, how it was talking about like trying not to become consumed by that concept of just being just another part of tomorrow coming, maybe kind of how it's like saying that official big, like people keep talking about macro scale, how those efforts have largely seemed to like fail the writer and the recipient of the letter, and also just we can extrapolate that, say that it has failed the people they are part of. Now it's really this personal connection to each other that is what is going to save them and save them and the people of Puerto Rico in general from the disasters of both Hurricane Maria, but also very much colonialism and American imperialism.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Does anybody else want to add on to that? I don't want to keep talking at people. I definitely want to hear people's voices in response to each other. No? Okay. Well, no, thank you for all of those insightful comments. I want to kind of engage in a little, I would call it'll be a kind of self-questionnaire. I want you to go back to the list that you crafted of the instances of disaster that you've maybe identified that your communities have gone through, and I want you to choose one, just one of them. So do that right now, choose one. And once you choose one, I'm going to give you a list of questions. We're going to go question by question, and you're going to answer the questions in response to where you find yourself positioned in. The first question in relation to have people already selected that instance of disaster? Can I get a thumbs up from people who are maybe on video? Okay, so once you did, based on that instance of disaster that you selected, I think the first question I want you to ask yourself and to write down the answer to is, what is your proximity to that situation? Or in other words, I can rephrase the question, how are you positioned in relation to that situation? Or another way to rephrase that question would be, how are you connected, and or why do you care about that situation enough to write about it? So answer that question first, write it down on a piece of paper based on the instance of disaster that you selected. Again, what is your proximity to that situation, or how are you positioned in relation to it? Or how are you connected, and or why do you care enough about the situation to write about it? To give yourself a few seconds to answer that question. So depending on the situation that you selected from your list, would you be writing as a person with direct experience, as witness, or both? And once you answer that or choose, then respond to the following one, which would be, how would this affect your angle or approach to writing about it? Again, would you be writing as a person with direct experience, as witness, or both? After that, how would this affect your angle and approach to writing about it? And then also as a sub-question, what point of view would you write from? Would you write from a first person point of view, second person point of view, or third person point of view, and why? Moving on to the next question, and if people need me to go back to the last one, like, again, feel free to unmute your mics and like let me know, and I'm very enthusiastic about hearing other people's voices. But the next question is for you to answer for yourself. If you close your eyes and remember or immerse yourself in that situation that you selected, what emotions arise or do you associate with it? Write them down. Close your eyes right now. What emotions do you associate with that instance of disaster that you selected? And write all of them down. And when you begin to open your eyes again and you're able to look at that list of emotions that you wrote down, is the range of emotions layered and varied, or is it a little monotone and flat? So again, if you close your eyes and remember or immerse yourself in that situation that you selected, what emotions arise or do you associate with it? And once you're done with that exercise and you open your eyes again, look at the list of emotions and see if the range of emotions that you wrote down are layered and varied, or if they're a little monotone and can fall flat. With theirs. So again, who else is or could potentially be writing about this instance of disaster that you selected from your list? What's your positionality in relation to them? And would your work be in conversation with theirs? Think about that. Write down even names if you can think of people who might potentially be writing about it, or traditions you could potentially be writing under that have already been dealing with these things. What your positionality is in relation to these traditions or people or collectives, and would your work be in conversation with theirs? Okay, so now that you have all of these answers in response to these questions, look over all of your answers, take them in, consider the ethics and outcome of writing about the situation you selected. And if you decide to proceed, taking into account your answers and therefore the framework for your work, because this is in a way a framework for what you would be writing about, begin writing into that situation that you selected with the few minutes that we have left. And if you need a prompt or a push to get you going on how to like enter that, what is the strongest memory you have of that situation? And start writing about that memory, taking into account these answers. Know what point of view you would be writing from. What other ones did we answer right now? What your proximity to that situation is, know and how that would affect your angle. All of these answers, take them into account as you begin to write into the situation. Now, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, we have about 5 minutes left, Malcolm, or yeah, 5 minutes, okay. So with your last 5 minutes, or maybe 3, and then we can say a quick goodbye if anybody else has questions or comments, but write into that situation. If you decide to proceed after looking at all of these answers about writing into that situation. And a possible point of entry is exploring the strongest memory you have of that situation. I was scrolling through the book to see if there was like a poem I could quickly close with. I didn't think about closing with a poem, but I will actually show people the artwork if they want it. The book has really beautiful, beautiful artwork by this Puerto Rican artist. Let me look for her name. Mariana Isabel Ramos Ortiz. I'll just... That's the estimated number of deaths after Hurricane Maria, and these deaths that are still being mourned in Puerto Rico. And have been a cause for a lot of pain, even as we continue to mourn the deaths after the earthquakes and the deaths that are going to inevitably happen now due to COVID and the negligent just government response. This is all hurricane-related imagery, you know, especially during the aftermath of the hurricane, the inability to get resources, access to potable water, to even buy water bottles, or just getting fuel, gas. The lines were incredibly long. You would stand there for hours. I'll just show one more, and I know we have to go. So thank you for giving me like a moment of your time and for sharing and for listening, and I hope everybody's like holding up well during this time and like staying safe, and thank you.
That was so great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excited to hear you now.
Yeah. I had so much to, I'm sorry I didn't comment more. I was just like thinking. And I was also particularly thinking like about how I mostly write as like the daughter of like people who've experienced disaster, I guess. And because of that, I like feel power, but the power feels like guilt. And I don't know. And also like how effective like close third person is when you're like writing from someone's perspective, but it's like still is like an omniscient narrator. Anyway, that's what I was thinking. Okay, thanks. Should I just start? Okay.
I'm gonna share my screen with you. I'm doing a PowerPoint. If at any moment it's like really confusing, please comment and I will slow down or do something else. Okay, so I'm sharing, oh no. How do I share optimize for full screen? Here we go, there we go. Okay, so so this is about, it's called Constraint is Muy Punk. So I'm talking mostly about like sonnets and humor and how they use, hold on, I'm gonna move this down because I'm realizing everyone can see that. Constraint and how constraint, like being kind of having like being trapped in a box, maybe as we are now, can actually be super productive. I'm not saying like write King Lear right now. You can also mourn the world as it burns. That is also effective, and being productive is silly. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the sonnet form. So created by Shakespeare, who I believe was not one person, but several people all wearing the same hat. So just like in spoken word poetry, so in spoken word, in slam, the constraint there is 3 minutes and 10 seconds. And after that, you start getting points deducted. So you have 3 minutes and 10 seconds to tell a story, to give us like a beginning, a rise, a fall, and to really like grab the audience's attention for points. And like this, in the sonnet form, you have a constraint of 14 lines, 10 syllables a line with an AB rhyme scheme sometimes. So this is a sonnet from Romeo and Juliet, which I never read, sorry, I got my MFA. So here is two households, actually, can I get a volunteer to read it? Maybe like 2 people. Okay, I'm gonna just, whoever wants to do it. Okay.
I can help you. I
All
can
right.
do one.
Yeah, all right.
Somebody else jumped in.
Okay, cool.
So
yeah, line by line. I'm gonna click through it.
okay. 2 households, both alike in dignity.
In fair Verona, where we lay our scene.
From ancient grudge break to new mutiny.
Where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes.
A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life.
Whose misadventured piteous overthrows.
Do with their death bury their parents' strife.
The fearful passage of their death-marked love.
And the continuance of their parents' rage.
Which but their children's end not could remove.
Is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage.
The which if you with patient ears attend.
What here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend.
Okay, whew, thank you so much. So that is a traditional sonnet. Thank you for reading it and feeling it, how it is spoken out loud. This one is by Terrence Hayes from his collection, American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. So let's do the same thing. If you can be the same readers or someone else wants to volunteer. I can do the first one if someone else wants to do the next one. I lock you in an American sonnet that is part prison. I have my glasses on, but okay, I'm just gonna read it. Part panic closet, a little room in a house set aflame. I lock you in a form that is part music box, part meat, grinder to separate the song of the bird from the bone. I lock your persona in a dream-inducing sleeper hold, where your better selves watch from the bleachers. I make you both Jim and Crow here. As the Crow, you undergo a beautiful catharsis, trapped one night in the shadows of the gym. As the gym, the feel of the Crow, shit dropping to your floors is not unlike the stars, falling from the pep rally posters on your walls. I make you a box of darkness with a bird in its heart. Voltas of acoustics, instinct and metaphor. It is not enough to love you. It is not enough to want you destroyed. So here, I really love this. It's like the sonnet of sonnets, in my opinion. He's actively using the form to talk about how it is a prison, and also to talk about the Jim Crow laws. And he's using the constraint of the form to talk about a particular constraint in the world. And I think it's super beautiful and cool. So I'm sorry, I'm worried about time, so I'm gonna speed through this a little bit. I can also put the link in here so you can look at the poem later. It's also available online. So thinking about the sonnet, I got really obsessed with like the constraint of it, and I'm also really obsessed with dialogue, and how the way people can talk to each other. Well, mostly what I was thinking about is how one time Morgan Parker said that the heart beats to iambic pentameter, and because of that, like, everybody is a poet. So I wrote a sonnet as a conversation. So I do need two people to help me read this.
I can help out.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Oh my God, what if I like just called on people by their names in the video? That'd be like so Big Brother and creepy. Okay, so this is a sonnet between two people who have like a crush on each other. So one is 1 and the other is 2. So I just need someone to be 2.
No one else volunteers, I will, but maybe someone participating.
Okay, usually I have like everybody read it. So we could do that, but that might be hard on the ears. We could. Okay.
I'll be number 2.
Okay, cool. All right, so here we go. Malcolm, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking me here. It's so lovely.
Best view in the city. God really went off.
What's next? Are we gonna rent a canoe?
You're trying to rent a canoe right now?
No way. Haha, that's so corny. Plus, I'm broke.
Well, nobody looks cool in a canoe.
I would say.
I would save you. I would bring you to shore.
Oh, sorry, that's messed up.
Yeah.
So 2 is supposed to. Okay, yeah. Now go 1.
Okay. Oh, okay. If you wanted to.
Yeah, I guess I would want to. Sure. Yeah.
I know how to swim, or just like not drown.
Yeah, I actually don't know how to. Oh God.
Wait, what? Then you wouldn't actually save?
Someone just crashed the car into the lake.
Whoa. Okay. So the next one is the people who crashed the car into the lake. I can be man if everybody else wants to read at the same time. I don't know if that's going to be weird, but that's usually how I do it, and it's fun. So I'll be man. Man is just a regular person, and Eddie is kind of a freak. Okay, so I'm going to go. Shit, Eddie, wake up. Oh, no, no, no.
What's up, man?
What's up, man? I was dreaming about sand.
The car just crashed into a fucking lake.
Oh.
What the fuck, Eddie? That isn't helpful.
Sorry.
I was just being a ghost.
You're still wearing that sheet over your head.
That's kind of like I didn't bring clothes.
You can't just get out of the car and help me.
Sorry, can't. Not wearing any pants, man.
We're never gonna make it to the show.
It's okay,
man. We can do our own show.
My phone's dead. Let's try to flag down a car.
I have an
idea. Let's set me on fire.
No, Eddie, that isn't something that could work.
I know, but wouldn't it be kind of cool?
Okay, so this is the show that they were trying to make it to. I'll be the singer and you'll be the audience who loves me. This one is for all you lonely hearts.
You are
perfect and I love you so. Woo!
This one is about the person you love.
Sounds familiar to me. Hope it's the one.
Have you ever been in love but you were worried?
Play the one
that we know the best. Yeah.
This one is about pain but also not.
We are so
excited to hear it. Wow.
This one is for anybody who dreams.
We paid to
Paid to be here. Can you please
play
play
it?
it?
It's a song that you sing with your mouth hole.
A
A
lot.
A
lot
lot of us travel from far away.
You've heard it before and you will hear it.
This
This
sucks.
sucks.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. We wanted
What
the
a big
big
hit.
hits.
Okay, so I don't remember the words. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. So the assignment, which might be, I don't know how we can do this, but you pick up partner and write a conversation that's in sonnet form. Doesn't have to rhyme, but it's cool if you want to do that. 7 lines per person, 10 syllables each, a back and forth conversation, and the prompt is a conversation between 2 people about time travel. So next I'm going to talk about humor and manipulation of language. So a lot of times humor is used kind of like as a defense mechanism. I think I see it a lot like on Twitter right now, people being like, haha, like not knowing how to like interact with like death or like their mortality or like fear of very, very real fears on the horizon. One time, Terrence Hayes, who's in the MFA program that I and technically in still said, Melissa, you're pretty fucking funny, but so is Louis C.K., which I didn't know how to take that. But what I think he meant was that he was saying that I was using, that I'm distracted, that I was not letting myself like get down to something more like serious or deeper because I was afraid of being maybe like sentimental. I was afraid of like showing emotion. So instead I would make a stupid joke. So a lot of times humor is used in small talk to break the ice. It's a way of saying like, I'm approachable. I can make fun of myself. You can definitely trust me. And other times it can be used kind of as this like grand icing over a poisonous cake when you're like, there's nothing fine here, definitely eat the cake, everything is fine, look at this icing that I did. And it can distract from what it's really trying to get at, even if we don't necessarily know what we're trying to get at exactly. So we see this kind of observational comedy. And this is like typical, you see this, comedians do this. The source material is an observation about an absurdity in a thing, an institution, a phenomenon, instead of a personal, oops, sorry. I'm gonna put this over here because I can't see. Hold on. Instead of a personal experience. So Jerry Seinfeld says this when he's like, have you heard about this? Or someone's like, you know when? And a comic can be doing observational comedy and be like pointing out all of these like funny things, making all of these observations and be on stage for 30 minutes, but we can learn like nothing about who they are, and it keeps them from being vulnerable. So the question is, how can we as writers be observant and reveal things about ourselves as a person? How can we be funny and still be vulnerable? So hyperbole. What is hyperbole? It's an exaggerated statement or claim not meant to be taken seriously, used sometimes to express unexplainable feelings such as sadness, fear, love, and hunger, the 4 human emotions that we all have. So people could be like, I'm so hungry, I ate a horse. I'm so sad, I feel like a dead horse. I'm so in love with a horse. I don't know. And it's also a case for world building, which I will get into later. Sometimes people are like, that was so funny, I'm dead. A funnier way to maybe do that is use world building. So like expanding the I am dead to be like, for example, that was so funny that a ghost from 1974 crawled through the keyhole and slapped his knee and howled, and I was so startled that I spilled tea on my computer, and I was like, oh my God damn it, Rodrigo. And Rodrigo was like, at least you're not dead. So that is hyperbole. It is world building and building details upon details. So in the same way that like slam poetry and sonnets have these constraints, a meme is also a form of constraint, I would argue. Poetic form gives us constraint, as we've been talking about, and constraint gives us freedom to squeeze out the most important parts of what we need to say. And in this way, a meme is a constraint. You have to tell a joke or give a life truth with only a set of pictures and maybe only 240 characters. And Twitter and memes have been a way for the people, I would say, to take back language and an opportunity to point at something and say, that is me. I recognize myself in this. This is something that happens in my day-to-day. And because of this, I think I've seen a lot of the most like successful tweets and memes come from Generation Z, which isn't necessarily you who is watching, but could be. Some of my favorite memes, me leaving the pot in the sink because it needs to soak, me passing a large group of men by myself. I don't know why SpongeBob is so memeable, but he truly is. So this is one of my favorite quotes by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is from his essay on Carly Rae Jepsen, where he writes about how she weaponizes joy and how even her saddest songs are like, you really want to dance to them. And he says, we've run out of ways to weaponize sadness, so it has become an actual weapon. And I think this is really important to think about, like as a poet specifically, because I'm very kin to like only like writing when I'm really like listening to my sad emotions, and not seeing how I can use them to build something else. So here's a poem I really like by Jose Olivares. It's from a series of poems from his book, Citizen Illegal, called Mexican Heaven. And can I get a volunteer to read it? Oh my gosh, the Zoom is a struggle. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Is it me or did somebody else volunteer?
I
I'll do
only
it if
saw
you need another
you.
volunteer.
Okay.
Hey, there we go.
Okay.
You get another voice happening.
All right.
All right. There are white people in heaven too. They build condos across the street and ask the Mexicans to speak English. I'm just kidding. There are no white people in heaven. I love it.
It's so good. It's so short. It's so concise, and it like is this. It's in many ways like a setup of a joke. It's like you can see him saying this into a microphone in front of a crowd of people, but like not as a poet, as a stand-up comic, in like pacing, being like, I'm just kidding. There's no white people in heaven. And I think, I mean, this works because it's so short. I think it also, there's also like a sadness to it. If you're looking, I mean, he's talking about gentrification in like 5 lines, and he's talking about displacement, but he's also making a joke. Oh, okay. So ways to weaponize humor. Not by being mean. I think I was really like turned off from things that were funny because they would make me like feel bad, and there was this sense of, I don't know, I think I enjoy irony, but then I don't know how to interact with people when they're not being sincere. And I think a lot of times like our instinct is to be like funny in a mean way. But actually, when we're funny, we're establishing an intimacy with our readers. So we can like make a joke in our writing. We can say something funny, a funny observation, and then later on, when we say something more serious or something with more weight, their ears are more open to it. They're like more willing to take it in because they feel like they know you because you made a joke with them. In the same way, it's sort of like flirting with the reader, or like using the charms you use in everyday life to make friends. Ever heard of it, friends? Okay, so hindbrain. I don't know how much I will continue putting this in my slides because I'm not sure of like how much of a bullshit psychology term it is, but the hindbrain is for like what is like accessed by like improvers and freestyle rappers, and they access this to world build. So we mentioned world building before. World building is a means of creating a set of characters and situations that are connected to each other and inform each other. So you're building on top of this. So let's say you're like, okay, you like think of a rabbit, and then you're like, what if the rabbit had shoes? Why does the rabbit need shoes? Is there a basketball court? I'm like thinking of Space Jam now, probably. That's like what's going on. If you can, I'd like to imagine the hindbrain as a creative little octopus wearing a funny hat, and it's like pulsing around my consciousness. And it's not the octopus that is funny, I am the funny one, but the octopus has access with all these limbs to grab at all these imaginary options in the air, and you just have to kind of let it. So things that prohibit the hindbrain, self-consciousness, the phrase, well, actually, capitalism, men, hegemonic forces, institutions to make us tired, self-isolation, internalized misogyny, a lot. But it's important to be acutely observant to combat this. It's important to be hyperbolically imaginative to combat everything that prohibits the hindbrain. And it's important to be able to let yourself play. Okay, I just put this in like really recently. I was just like boredom. So boredom and productivity. I think a lot of us are really like stir crazy right now. I've been thinking a lot too back to my time as like a teen where my mom never let me out of the house because she was like a crazy Guatemalan lady. But because of that, I spent so much time writing, and I became like a good writer because I had all this time to myself. And I had the constraint of my house is what, and the constraint of my mother's rules was what like let me push against it and be the person who I am today, who I'm like pretty okay with. And I think maybe now is a good time to try to do that, to try to think of like how we can like play with the constraints that we are currently in. Okay, so here's some prompts we can do for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes, because it's 4:30 that it ends. Yes. Okay, so write a poem that starts with, I'm so bored that I could blah, and then just be like as hyperbolic as possible. Also that you don't have to, you can just choose from any of these. Write an ode to toilet paper. Write about you from 10 months from now. You have perspective. What does it feel like? Now write from the perspective of a person you can't stand. If you were to make them into a trope or a character, what would they be like? What would they desire? How do they interact with you? You are trapped inside a Justin Timberlake song. What does the world look like, and how do you get out? Using the power of association and your octopus mind, write down everything you think of when you hear the word frumpy. Write a response poem to the saddest song you've ever heard. And write down 14 things you think are funny, but maybe nobody else does. And now turn those 14 things into a sonnet. Okay, so I'll give you 10 minutes again. All right, to wrap up what you're writing. Thank you so much for participating. Okay, so closing. Just want to say that this is about telling the truth. I think you're successful as a writer if you've conveyed a truth. Humor is a mirror of life, I believe. There's a deep sadness in the world, and on the edges there's always something kind of ridiculous happening. I also don't think laughter distracts from pain. I think it just highlights it differently and makes it more approachable and conquerable, if you're doing it right, that is. It's also, I think I hear a lot about like creating reflections in writing and doing something that's relatable maybe, which I think is super important, but I think maybe it's not always about creating reflections. I think it's definitely important to be specific to your story and tell your truth, definitely. But sometimes it's more so just about recognizing that somebody else is human. So when, I guess more this is a conversation, what I'm saying is like how you are approaching things, like as a reader, if you don't necessarily like, you can relate to something without like seeing your specific identity in it. I got this very much from my friend Crystal Valentine, who says, I want to make you uncomfortable. I want you to relate to this, even if it isn't about you, to let you know that I am human. Okay, that is all I have. Thank you so much. Thank you to Malcolm and Anna for her lovely workshop. Thank you to Manuel, Carla, Jessica. Thanks everybody for watching. This has been, I've never done this before, so this has been fun. Yeah, thanks. Also, yeah, if we want to share, should we do like a sharing from both workshops?
Yeah, we've got maybe time for 1 or 2 people to share, even if it's just excerpts. And yeah, don't let me stand in the way of that.
Cool. Okay, so whoever is in this right now, if you want to share, we would love to hear from you. Please, we are starved for human contact. Yeah.
Voices other than our own.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any of those sonnets that they want to share?
I kind of want to share the last poem I wrote, the last thing we had to wrote from the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll just do. I unless anyone doesn't want to hear it, I can do that.
Go for it.
So, me 10 months later. The world has ended, as it tends to do, and once again I have to figure out what from the rubble is worth the effort to dig with bare hands and care. That's it. It's not much, but I think there's something interesting in it.
Yeah. I like that you said, once again, that was cool. I like where it's going.
Dang. Well,
What?
I have a very different tone, but I did the, can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. My internet connection is bad. But I did the Justin Timberlake prompt.
Cool.
And if you'll excuse it, there is a swear word towards the end, so please let me know if I should censor myself. Anyway, a very tall man is singing on a platform. It's a song that I recognize only vaguely, like wedding songs that you only hear once but somehow stick in your brain forever. The bass line is stuck in the floor, and I gingerly step forward. Turn left, gyrating dancers. Turn right, gaudy Hollywood set. I choose right, but the set tips and falls on the floor, a 2D disappointment. The man is now singing directly to me, and the dancers from the left are back. I'm uncomfortable, it's hot, and completely out of options. I yell, I really don't like men. And I shoot up in bed, cold sweat on my back. Strangest nightmare I've ever had.
Nice.
Thank you.
Cool. I can hear myself.
Okay, yeah, always harder to do this in a virtual setting.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to that last portion of would anyone like to share?
Yeah.
But yeah, unless there is anyone else who very currently wants to share their writing, I do just want to once again say thank you to everyone. Thank you to all of you who joined us virtually to participate. Thank you so much to Anna and Melissa for putting on this workshop today, for working through all of the runaround that happened with COVID and everything. And thank you again so much to the Department of English, to the Center for Latin American Studies, and to the Year of Creativity. Yeah. That
Thank
is
you so
all
much.
I have to say.
Yeah, I want to say something too. Like just being together and even in this like virtual form is so fulfilling. And City of Asylum is working really hard to get programming back. Of course, we're not going to be able to do that as soon as we thought, and just and I hope to like physically be able to like bring you guys to Pittsburgh and for you guys to like share your words and your experiences with us on our stage. And there's definitely hope for that happening in the future. So thank you for what you all do, and Malcolm, and like being a part of the Latinx and Proud board. You're just invaluable to the series, and Melissa and Anna, I admire like everything that you guys do as poets and as people. I think that's really important to recognize. And then just, yeah, on behalf of City of Asylum, just like, thank you so much.
Thank you. It means a lot. I'm very sad
Yeah.
that we can't be there.
And I hope you can
Yeah.
find a way to, like, I don't know, like postpone or do it for them so much.
Yeah, let's just keep in touch and like keep working towards that common goal.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, now I have like an attachment, like I don't want to go.
I know, I'm like, okay.
Well, I just want to reiterate from our side what I said at the beginning, which is the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Pittsburgh is ready and willing and poised to support this event when it comes live, which will happen. We're really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you can also, whether it's City of Asylum or you as people, if you find anything that the center can be helpful with, whether it's sharing our platform for these events as we get used to this virtual environment more and more, please count on us. And thank you very much. It was I'm truly glad to have contributed to this first step. And as we all try and find some normalcy in the middle of these extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah. Thank you.